come home, when you first come
No,
home?
I'm not doing all that. I'm not going all the way back. I can't do this.
So
You know what I mean?
they're trying to
No.
help. They're trying to help.
You're trying to
It's
help.
not helping me.
They moved in at 4:30 p.m., not a minute sooner, not a minute later, and a quiet warehouse on the edge of Hawkins County turned into the center of a case that has haunted a small town and a nation for years. Unmarked SUVs rolled up, tactical officers fanned out, and by dusk investigators were carrying out sealed evidence bags and locked containers. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation later confirmed what everyone feared and what others quietly hoped. Significant items of interest were recovered. If you want verified updates as this develops, hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you're notified the moment new, confirmed information is released. Below is a clear, careful look at what happened, why the timing and the tactics matter, what significant might mean in the context of a long-running missing person investigation, how the community reacted, and why this raid could be a crucial turning point in the search for Summer Wells. I've drawn on what's publicly known and shown how each detail shapes the next step for investigators, and for anyone who cares about seeing this case move forward. A precise 4:30 p.m. raid transformed a quiet warehouse into the epicenter of the Summer Wells investigation. The choice of 4:30 p.m. for the raid wasn't random theater. Law enforcement agencies plan such operations around a set of tactical factors. Who is expected to be present, daylight and visibility, ease of establishing perimeter control, and the best moment for surprise that minimizes risk to officers and bystanders. That time sits squarely in late afternoon. People were winding down work. Families were starting evening routines, and traffic patterns are often predictable. For investigators, that predictability can be an asset. A controlled, deliberate sweep at a precise time increases the chance of securing the site intact, catching potential subjects off guard, and preserving any evidence from being moved or destroyed. When a building that has blended into local life for months or years suddenly becomes the scene of a high-profile raid, the ripple effects are immediate. To neighbors, it is disorienting. To investigators, it signals movement from months of background work into an operational phase. Planning to that minute usually means the agency believes there is something concrete to find, not just a hunch, but paper trails, witness information, forensic leads, phone data, or corroborated intelligence. That seriousness is why people stopped and watched, why small-town chatter surged online, and why the TBI's later confirmation that items of interest were recovered carried such weight. The timing raises expectations that this is more than a symbolic sweep. It's a targeted strike informed by investigative work. Tactical officers and unmarked vehicles swarmed the site, signaling a carefully planned and deliberate operation. The images from the scene, SUVs with tinted windows, officers in tactical gear, teams forming perimeters, tell a story about the operation's objectives and the agency's risk assessment. Tactical resources aren't used casually. They arrive when there's concern about potential resistance, when evidence may be fragile or easily disturbed, or when a quiet approach is essential to preserve the element of surprise. The presence of unmarked vehicles and specialized teams also suggests interagency cooperation. Local deputies, state agents, and possibly federal partners coordinate roles to cover entrances, secure evidence chains, and manage media and public safety. That level of orchestration implies prior surveillance and planning. Law enforcement typically conducts days or weeks of background work, watching movements, conducting checks on property ownership, analyzing digital leads, and lining up warrants. A deployment with tactical officers is the end of a long investigative runway. For the community, that spectacle can be frightening and hopeful at once. Frightening because the sight of armored officers is a dramatic break with normal life. Hopeful because it signals that investigators believe they have found a lead worth acting upon. Evidence bags, sealed containers, and boxes were carried out under heavy guard, suggesting crucial discoveries inside. When investigators emerge carrying sealed evidence bags and locked containers, that a visual shorthand for careful chain of custody procedures in action. Evidence of real probative value is handled, packaged, and transported with strict protocols so it can survive forensic analysis and potential courtroom scrutiny. The presence of multiple sealed items, not loose objects or casual carryouts, suggests that what investigators found needed to be preserved in a controlled manner, possibly fragile biological material, electronics with potential data, documents, clothing, or other items that might link persons to places or events. Why does packaging matter? Because the legal and scientific systems demand it. If investigators recover a phone or a memory device, forensic labs will extract metadata and logs only if the device was secured correctly. If biological material is found, its evidentiary value depends on how it was collected and stored. The methodical extraction and guarded transport signal investigators wanted to minimize contamination and preserve every possible lead. That raises the possibility that what was recovered could move the case beyond speculation toward testable evidence. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation confirmed significant items of interest had been recovered from the warehouse. The TBI's choice of language is worth unpacking. Agencies almost never use the word significant lightly. It's a deliberate term meant to convey more than an incidental find. When an agency labels recovered items as significant, they are telling the public those objects matter to the investigation's core questions. Who, what, where, when, and why. That does not necessarily mean an arrest is imminent or that the items are directly linked to Summer herself, but it does mean the items are worth forensic testing and follow-up. Confirmation from the TBI also has procedural implications. It likely reflects a consensus among investigators that the evidence has investigative value, and that labs will be asked to prioritize analysis. It also sets expectations for follow-up. The public, the press, and legal actors will look for further official statements. Importantly, significant does not guarantee the discovery will solve the case, but it raises the probability that investigators have an angle they previously lacked. The word significant was deliberately used, raising hopes of a breakthrough after years of dead-end leads. After years of tips and searches that produced little usable evidence, any carefully chosen word from investigators will be parsed for meaning. Significant achieves two things. It signals progress without tipping investigative strategy, and it manages public expectations by saying, in effect, we found things that matter. Now let us test and confirm. For families and communities exhausted by repeated false hopes, that measured optimism is both welcome and dangerous. Hope can be fragile. If the evidence does not yield results, the emotional cost of dashed expectations is real. Still, the psychological impact of such a label matters. It re-energizes law enforcement and the public alike, prompting renewed attention to phone tips, to who was connected to the building, and to previously overlooked contacts. It also invites scrutiny. People will demand details, timelines, and explanations. That tension between investigative secrecy necessary to preserve evidence and public demand for transparency will challenge the TBI and local agencies in the coming days. Neighbors described the scene as sudden, intense, and unlike anything ever seen in their community. Community reaction often reveals as much as official statements. For Hawkins County residents, the raid was a jarring interruption of daily life. Rural communities are tightly knit. They notice when traffic patterns change, when unfamiliar faces appear, and when law enforcement converges with urgency. Neighbors at the scene described a quiet street that suddenly filled with tactical personnel, lights reflecting off warehouse siding, and the hush that falls when a serious event disrupts a small-town rhythm. That silence, the hush while sealed bags were loaded and vehicles drove away, is the kind of image that lodges in memory. Witnesses' accounts can also provide leads. Who else was seen at the site previously? What kind of activity occurred? And whether any local rumor previously described odd comings and goings. For investigators, community observations can validate or challenge background intelligence. For the public, Such stark scenes revive collective memory of Summer's disappearance and reopen wounds that have been settling into a complicated mix of hope, suspicion, and fatigue. The raid's secrecy and timing indicate investigators had strong intelligence guiding the operation. Executing a raid at a fixed minute with tactical coverage and controlled extraction of evidence implies confidence in the underlying intelligence. The site was likely linked via forensic or human source leads to a plausible next step in the case. Intelligence can come from many sources. A confidential informant, new technological analysis of phone or social data, a re-examination of past tips that points to a pattern, or an unrelated arrest that produced corroborating information. Whatever prompted the operation, investigators judged it strong enough to risk moving from background inquiry to physical intervention. Secrecy is often maintained to protect informants and investigative technique. If investigators announce plans publicly, potential suspects or collaborators could flee, destroy evidence, or coordinate cover stories. The silent precision of this operation suggests a level of care indicating that the TBI believed acting quickly and privately was the right tactical choice. Speculation centers on whether the evidence links directly to Summer Wells or a potential suspect. When sealed items leave a scene, observers naturally ask, does this point to the victim or the suspect? Both possibilities have different investigative implications. Items tied to Summer could be personal effects, clothing, or biological traces that point to her presence. Items tied to a suspect might include stolen property, tools used to commit a crime, electronics showing communication or movement, or documents that establish motive or intent. Either category could pivot the investigation toward resolution, but both require careful testing and legal groundwork. The speculative phase will be sensitive. Law enforcement must balance the need to follow leads with the responsibility to avoid premature public conclusions that could harm the investigation or the rights of innocent people. For the public, the urge to know is intense. For investigators, the need for procedural caution is equally intense. That tension will play out over the coming days as forensic results are sought and legal actions, warrants, subpoenas, possible arrests are weighed. The raid rekindled hope in a community that has lived with uncertainty since Summer's 2021 disappearance. For many, this operation is more than a tactical move. It's the first sign in years that the case is moving from theory to tangible action. The emotional impact is profound. Families and neighbors who have carried the burden of unanswered questions for years now have a reason to believe investigators may be close to meaningful answers. Vigils and social media threads have already begun to pulse with renewed attention, and public agencies will feel pressure to update the community as legally appropriate. But hope will coexist with caution. The history of missing person cases is littered with near breakthroughs that cooled under further testing. The community's best contribution now is measured. Stay alert for official requests for information, avoid spreading unverified claims, and trust that investigators will pursue confirmed leads methodically. That posture preserves both the integrity of the investigation and the dignity of the family waiting for closure. The discovery could mark a turning point in one of Tennessee's most haunting unsolved cases. If forensic analysis confirms a clear link, biological, physical, or digital, the case could transition from mystery to criminal investigation with a defined suspect or set of suspects. That turning point would shift investigative resources toward building a prosecutable case. Interrogations, additional warrants, formal charges, and courtroom preparation. Even if the items are indirect, for example, evidence of contact, movement, or financial transactions, they can provide the connective tissue investigators need to move forward. Conversely, if testing does not yield direct connections, the raid still represents progress. It shows investigators are following leads, testing theories, and re-energizing a search that has been stalled for years. Takeaways: what this moment teaches us. This operation was precise, targeted, and executed with high-level planning. The TBI's confirmation that significant items were recovered signals real progress compared with the years of dead ends and noise. The community reaction, a mixture of renewed hope and cautious skepticism, is understandable and appropriate. Finally, the case feels more active now than at any point in the last 4 years, but the path from a warehouse raid to answers is necessarily methodical. Forensic testing, legal safeguards, corroboration, and time. If you know anything about activity around that warehouse, ownership details, people who work there, or any relevant contacts, the best course is to contact law enforcement through official channels. Avoid spreading unverified speculation on social platforms that can hamper investigations and hurt families. Let the evidence do the heavy lifting. This moment may mark the beginning of the end of a long silence. It may also be one step among many, some noisy and some quiet, that eventually bring the case to resolution. Either way, investigators now have items to test, and the public has reason cautiously to watch and support the work that follows. Stay subscribed for verified updates. When officials share confirmed findings, those are the milestones that finally move a case from question to answer.